Council members and participants, we are now live.
Good morning. Before we begin the public hearing, I will make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat to public health from COVID-19, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Golden, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak. Mr. Golden?
Councilmember O.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair and colleagues. I am present.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Johnson.
Present. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues.
Councilmember Jones. Vice Chair Squilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Present.
And Chair Driscoll.
Present. Well, thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections regarding bill numbers 220299, 220638, and 220666. Prior to requesting Mr. Golden to read the titles of the bills being heard, I would like to inform members and the public that bill number 220299 is being held in committee by request of the sponsor. Mr. Golden, will you please read the titles of the bills?
Bill number 220638, an ordinance amending Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, by adopting the 2018 edition of the International Residential Code, as published by the International Code Council, including maintenance of previously adopted amendments to the 2015 International Residential Code as adopted under the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code Act, all under certain terms and conditions, and Bill number 220666, an ordinance amending Chapter 93300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Use and Inspection of Tower and Mobile Cranes in Construction to require brakes for operators, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to be recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Mr. Golden, will you please call the first panel we have to testify this morning on bill number 220638?
The first panelist we have on bill number 220638 is Sarah K. Adama.
Good morning, Chairperson Driscoll and members of the Licenses and Inspections Committee. My name is Sarah Adamo, and I am the Legislative Affairs Manager of the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I am here to provide testimony on bill number 220638, which, if enacted, will amend Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, by adopting the 2018 edition of the International Residential Code as published by the International Code Council, including maintenance of previously adopted amendments of the 2015 International Residential Code as adopted under the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code Act, all under certain terms and conditions. The purpose of this legislation is to amend the Philadelphia Code to incorporate the 2018 International Residential Code, or IRC, as adopted by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with the retention of existing local changes. Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry regulations adopting these provisions became effective February 14th, 2022, with a 6-month grace period where applicants were permitted to design to the 2015 edition of the code. The department is supportive of this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I am happy to answer questions at this time.
We'll double check here, Sarah, real quick. Yeah, I think you're good. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Golden, do we have our next panel?
Mr. Chair, there are no further panels on bill number 220638. Oh, actually, it looks like Andre just popped into the meeting, and I believe he did have a question for Ms. Adamo.
Andre, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilmember, and good morning. My quick question was, I'm speaking on behalf of the Pennsylvania Apartment Association. We have 98 property management companies here in Philadelphia and represent over 156,000 units. Obviously, we're not talking about large apartment complexes, but I had a question around the townhomes definition because we do have a large portfolio of townhomes within the city of Philadelphia, and we want to obviously make sure we're in compliance and doing all we can to not only keep residents safe, but our investments safe. And I just had a quick question. When we're discussing the definition of townhomes, is that the traditional townhome definition of, like the row homes that we see throughout Philadelphia, or would these apartment complexes that are townhomes also fall under the guise of this legislation?
So the IRC applies to 1 and 2 family dwellings that are less than 3 stories in height that have separate means of egress. So a lot of times you'll see, a row of those built all together. Even if they're built all together, they could be on the same property. They could be on separate properties that could still fall under the IRC. And also, if we're talking about existing structures, you would also need to consider the existing building code on top of the IRC.
Understood. Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was the only question I had here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
If there are no further questions, thank you for your testimony, Sarah.
All right, Mr. Chair, looks like we're ready to go to bill number 220666.
On that bill, Mr. Golden, will you please call the first panel? We have to testify this morning on bill number 220666.
Absolutely. The first panel we have is Deputy Mayor of Labor, Richard Laser, but I believe he may not be on yet.
Manny, are you speaking for Mr. Laser?
Councilman, I certainly can. I defer to the committee if you'd like to wait a minute or two, but I'm ready to speak if you want testimony right now.
I think Manny, we're prepared to hear your testimony.
Sure, and let me take a moment to say this is a little bit poignant because this might be my last time being your designated Rich Laser for testimony or a hearing or anything like that. But let me get into the testimony.
All due respect to you, Manny, we were looking forward to seeing Rich on one of his last days.
Understood. Where did it go? Good morning, Chair Driscoll and members of the committee. My name is Manny Citron. I am Chief of Staff in the Philadelphia Department of Labor. I appear before you today to testify in support of Bill number 220666. Bill number 220666 will make straightforward and common sense changes to Chapter 9-3300 of the Philadelphia Code, which regulates the use and inspection of tower and mobile cranes used in construction across our city. Specifically, it will prohibit supervisors from requiring that a tower crane operator remain at the operating controls for a period exceeding 4 hours without permitting the operator to descend the tower for at least a 30-minute break. Additionally, this bill will also require that operators must be allowed to descend at any time to have access to sanitary facilities as needed. During such time, the supervisors are allowed to assign a second operator to continue working the crane. With the complexity and scale of many modern construction sites, this administration believes that it is in the interest of safety to the operator, their co-workers on the job, and also the public at large, that workers operating critical machinery, such as tower cranes, should have regular access to breaks. Additionally, we believe that all employees should have reasonable access to sanitary facilities. The administration would like to thank the sponsors for their leadership on this issue. We are in support of the bill, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Citron, and thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee for this panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Manny, real quick, and thank you for your testimony, and thank Mr. Laser for all his work during the years. We're going to miss him. But as far as enforcement of this, how do you perceive enforcement to work? And if it's not followed, what would the city or the departments do in order to make sure that this safe measure is being done?
So we have had some internal conversations on how enforcement would work. We have a few ideas which we will be presenting to you offline on how that could happen. We anticipate worst cases there may need to be some further amendments to clarify how enforcement would work. It's not explicitly provided for within the language as written, but we have some ideas and we can make that happen by December 8th at the latest.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's important and knowing how important safety is on the construction site, and to make sure that it's followed and that everybody knows what the rules are. And I think long as that's the case here and we're presenting, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly.
I think the chair would like to recognize Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm actually just noting that after we are finished the panels on this bill, I'd like to go back to the first bill for questions for our witness, Sarah Adamo. I have no questions for this witness or anybody on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Any other questions for the panel? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gold, would you call the next panel? And then note that the Councilman No would like, before we go into public comment, or I guess we can do Sarah now.
Mr. Chair, let's finish doing the panels on 220666, and then we can circle back to the previous bill.
Please recognize the next panel.
Absolutely. The next panel is Dan Sullivan and Dan Mitchell.
Be on mute. Good morning, everybody. Council persons and participants. Can everybody hear me okay?
Very good.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in addition to what Manny had said, we're also interested with the amendment of Bill number 220666 for in the interest of safety, allowing an operator to remain at the operating controls for a period exceeding 4 hours without requiring the operator to descend the tower. So we'd like the requirement of a break for sanitary facilities. I have a good bit of knowledge in this. I sit on the CCO telehandler task force. I'm a crane inspector management committee member for CCO, alternate for the written exam management committee and tower committee for CCO. I sit on the ASME B30.27 subcommittee and the PA State Crane Board. And I'm also an 18-and-a-half-year member of operating engineers, of which I have operated tower cranes throughout the city. So I can attest to what it's like being stuck up there. Basically, we'd like there to be legislation that require breaks for tower crane operators after 4 hours at the controls. It's in the interest of both safety and sanitation, which can often go hand in hand. ASME B30.3, which is the standard for tower cranes, in the purpose even states that it is to prevent or minimize injury to workers and otherwise provide for the protection of life, limb, and property by prescribing safety requirements, provide direction to manufacturers, owners, employers, users, and others concerned with or responsible for its application, and guide governments and other regulatory bodies in development, promulgation, and enforcement of appropriate safety directives. It there goes forward in section 1.23.2C that says when access to the operator's cab requires a climb of 100 feet or more, sanitary facilities should be provided. So while it's only a recommendation, even ASME recognizes the need for sanitary facilities. 1926-51C simply states toilets at construction job sites, of which the porta-johns we're familiar with will suit, but 1926.51G states that eating and drinking areas, no employee shall be allowed to consume food or beverage in a toilet room, nor in any area exposed to a toxic material. Whereas currently, if you can picture a little 4x6 area of your office and you have a chair and seating controls, and then whatever room is left, that's typically where the operator, that's the last room that they have in order to eat and drink while they're stuck at these elevated positions in the cab, and also miterate in a bottle, defecate in a bucket, and they also have to take their excrement back to the ground with them. So all we're asking for is that they're either given a break in order to descend and use sanitary restroom facilities, which is pretty much backed up with the law right here, or be relieved by someone, which interpretation of 29 CFR 1910-141C1I goes on to state that for particular cases such as assembly line employees, bus drivers, if for the brief time it takes them to go to the bathroom would be disruptive, you can institute some sort of thing where a signal to another employee may provide relief while the first employee is away from the station. And like I said, long and short, that's all we're asking for. And it also states there was another interpretation of 1926 C1, C4 from February 23rd of 2005, in which they gave an example of a 10-story building with sanitary facilities at the ground level. Would this constitute compliance with the law? And what OSHA had to say about it was for it to be considered nearby toilet facilities, it has to take less than 10 minutes to get to them. So in this case, it might even be considered nearby, in which you would either need relief or the ability to get yourself down to them. But you have a girl on that. Yeah. In short, like I said, I would just imagine male or female, because we have female tower crane operators as well. You're stuck in this little 4x6 area for 8 hours, in which you have to urinate and defecate in bottles and buckets, eat in that space, and then carry your excrement to the ground with you. Like I said, all we want is humane conditions for all tower crane operators across the board. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for your testimony. I also want to recognize that Leader Curtis Jones has joined the meeting. Welcome, Leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Golden, do we have are we going to do the questions after any other testimony on this panel?
Yeah, if there's no further questions, we can move on to the next panel. I'd like to recognize the third panel for bill number 220666. Vaughn Buckley, if you're available. Terrific.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're connected and ready to proceed. Just please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, Mr. Buckley.
Good morning. My name is Vaughn Buckley, and I'm testifying on bill number 220666 as a representative of the Building Industry Association of Philadelphia, most commonly known as the BIA. The BIA represents a cross-section of the construction industry, and many of our members will be impacted by this bill directly and indirectly. I want to thank Committee Chair Driscoll, Councilman Squiller, and the rest of the L&I Committee for your opportunity to provide this testimony. I also want to say that while we were listed as an objection to this bill, I don't think that's a fair characterization. I'm in complete support of everything that has been said by both panel number 1 and panel number 2. The only reason that we have a discussion here today is that I believe that the bill as drafted does not properly reflect their testimony. The change that we had with the bill on Wednesday of last week that altered the language from allowing, which I will also note is the same words used by the folks testifying in panel 1 and 2, has been changed to requiring. And the effect here is that we are asking those folks that are operating our cranes to come down. And we are being asked to enforce that as both operators, contractors, and owners. As such, my comments are limited entirely to the items in this bill which are either, in our opinion, not championing safety or are infeasible to enforce. And while I notice there are members of the committee and of the testifying panel that have operated tower cranes and have appropriately discussed the impacts that come along with it, for those that haven't, I'd like to make a comparison to climbing ladders here. When you clean your gutters, you're typically climbing 10 to 20 rungs of a ladder, and on a 320-foot tower crane, that can be as many as 500 rungs. This bill has now been amended to require an operator to descend from the tower every 4 hours, assuming that they don't have any bathroom breaks. This would require them to ascend and descend 6 times on a 10-hour shift. This is a combined ascent and descent of 1,800 feet and nearly 3,000 rungs of a ladder. The idea that such a requirement is an enhancement to operator safety is really challenged by the facts. Imagine having to climb a ladder twice the height of the Comcast tower in order to work your shift in a 300-foot tower crane. That's what this bill is currently requiring. And this makes the operator's job less safe. It exposes them to physical stresses that are likely to violate the same OSHA requirements that have been present here in testimony. And it exposes the operators and the owners to a terrible choice. They can either follow the law or they can enhance operator safety. In some cases, it will not be possible to do both. Imagine having to climb 500 steps down on a ladder while a spring rain shower is present, a thunderstorm occurs, a fall tornado watch is in place, or a winter snow squall passes through. All of these events will happen at a point where an operator is in the crane for 4 hours, and to force them to the ground is unfair. I encourage and respectfully request that neither council nor the committee advances this bill without 2 issues: addressing the language concerns which do not support the panel testimony made by Manny on behalf of Deputy Mayor Laser or by the operating engineers, and that this bill will be supported by the BIA if the language is revised to the original proposed language and thoughtfulness is given to the enforcement mechanism and timing therein. On one of our initial testimony here on behalf of the Deputy Mayor, we also discussed that an enforcement mechanism currently isn't in place, and to ensure that we have efficient, fair, and consistent enforcement of this bill, we would encourage that to be considered prior to passage of the law. With that being said, I appreciate your time. We are in full support of anything that enhances worker safety, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee for this panel?
Mr. Chair, this is Councilmember Squillo. Yeah, I appreciate the testimony and looking forward to continue the conversation as we pass this bill out of committee, and be happy to discuss these concerns as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. If there's any other questions? Hearing no further questions from members for this panel, and there being no other panels to testify, we will take a brief break to connect members of the public. Or let me amend that. Mr. Golden, do we want to go back at this point?
Yeah, let's return to allow Councilmember O to ask his question.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My question is for our initial witness, Sarah Adamo. Is she available?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, thank you very much. For clarification for me, because there was a question about definitions, who does this bill retroactively apply to?
This bill is not retroactive. The adoption of this bill took place based on regulations from the state level, from labor and industry. It was effective February 14th, 2022. There was a 6-month grace period where any application that came in for, for example, new construction or an addition on a residential dwelling could choose whether they wanted to apply the new code, which is the 2018 IRC, or the previous code, which was 2015. After that grace period, all applications that come in are reviewed under the 2018.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to note publicly that I did receive a letter in opposition. However, I think it is important that anyone who wants to make opposition do so at a public hearing. Not through a letter. We cannot ask questions. We don't know. Yeah, we can meet people privately, but we have public hearings for a reason. If there is a good reason to oppose this bill, please say so publicly, and we can ask questions and people can be informed. Other than that, I sometimes will do the research on my own, but some of these things are very technical. We need public comment. I appreciate the last witness on the last bill. It was very clear to me what he was saying. I understand what he's saying. I'm not an operating engineer. I don't know the practicalities of all of this, but I appreciate public comment. I appreciate that explanation. It's informative. So thank you very much for that, and thank you very much, Chairman, for the leeway.
Thank you, Councilmember. If there are no further questions from members for this panel, we will take a brief break to connect members of the public that wish to testify on the two bills before the committee today. All right, Mr. Golden, will you please call the first public commenter we will have to testify this morning on any of the bills before this committee today?
Mr. Chair, there is currently no one signed up to give public comment on the bills before committee today.
So then that would conclude the hearing, and then we would go into the public meeting. There being no further questions from the members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify on bills number 220638 and 220666, I will ask if there's anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on the bills being considered today. Hearing none, I want to thank the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. I now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the hearing before we go into our public meeting on the bills. We will now pause the proceedings briefly as multiple participants leave the hearing. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now go into public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bills before this committee today. We will now convene the public meeting. Mr. Golden, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak. Mr. Golden?
Councilmember O?
Yes, I'm present.
Councilmember Johnson?
Present, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Jones? Councilmember Jones? Vice Chair Squilla?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Chair Driscoll?
Present. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on the amendment to bill number 220638.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer an amendment to bill number 220638. A copy of the amendment is circulated to all members of the committee. I move that the amendment to bill number 220638 be approved. Is there a second?
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember Richardson seconds the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to bill number 220638 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries and the amendment to bill number 220638 has been approved. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on bill number 220638 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 220638 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember O seconds the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that the bill number 220638 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and that further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 220666.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer an amendment to Bill number 220666. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that the amendment to Bill number 220666 be approved.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember Johnson seconds the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to Bill number 220666 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries, and the amendment to Bill number 220666 has been approved. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on Bill number 220666 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the Bill number 220666 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember Jones seconds the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that Bill number 220666 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further moved that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. This concludes the business before the committee today on licenses and inspections. Thank you all very much for your attendance, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great job.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.